Power isn't always a bespoke suit or a corner office in a glass skyscraper. Sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one you refuse to see. Watch what happens when a billionaire's fragile ego pushes a silent cleaning lady one step too far. The air inside the penthouse suite of Harrington Holdings was practically vibrating with nervous energy. Situated on the 75th floor, overlooking the glittering skyline of Chicago, the boardroom was a monument to corporate excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of Lake Michigan, while the interior was adorned with imported Italian marble and rich mahogany. At the center of it all stood Richard Harrington, a man whose arrogance was as legendary as his ruthless business tactics. Richard adjusted the cuffs of his custom Brioni suit, his eyes darting to the Vacheron Constantin watch wrapped around his wrist. He was 42, inherited his wealth from his father, and possessed the kind of entitlement that only came from never having been told no in his entire life. Today, however, his usual confidence was masked by a thin veneer of cold sweat. Harrington Holdings was on the verge of a catastrophic bankruptcy. To save his empire, Richard had turned to the shadow economy. He was expecting a meeting with the head of the most feared Korean Mafia syndicate in North America, a ghost of a man who operated under the Western name Leon Hayes. Leon was the newly crowned king of the underworld, having ruthlessly consolidated power from Seoul to Chicago. "Gregory," Richard snapped, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Is the contract verified? If there is a single comma out of place when Hayes arrives, I will personally see to it that you never work in this city again." Gregory, a pale, overworked assistant, fumbled with a leather portfolio. "Yes, Mr. Harrington. The legal team at Goldman Sachs reviewed it off the books. It's perfect." While the executives scrambled like frightened mice, a solitary figure moved silently near the back of the expansive room. Chloe Jenkins was a striking black woman in her late 20s, though her beauty was deliberately buried beneath the shapeless, faded gray uniform of pristine cleaning services. Her dark, expressive eyes were cast firmly downward, her hair pulled back into a severe, utilitarian bun. To Richard and his board of directors, Chloe was not a human being. She was part of the furniture, a ghost meant to scrub their messes and empty their trash without ever making a sound. But Chloe was not just a cleaning lady. 3 years ago, she had been a brilliant trauma surgeon operating a clandestine clinic in the heart of Seoul. She was the woman who had pulled a bullet out of Leon Hayes' chest when his own lieutenants had betrayed him. She was the woman he had loved, the woman he had promised to marry. But when a rival cartel put a $10 million bounty on her head to get to Leon, Chloe made the hardest decision of her life. She faked her own death in a fiery car crash to free Leon from his enemy's leverage. She fled to America, changed her identity, and took the lowest paying, most invisible job she could find. For 3 years, she had lived in the shadows, waiting for the day Leon finally eradicated the threats against them. She was wiping down the edge of the massive oak conference table when the accident happened. Richard, pacing like a caged tiger and barking into his sleek smartphone, spun around without looking. He collided hard with Gregory, who was holding a freshly brewed, scalding cup of artisan espresso. The cup launched into the air, shattering against the edge of the table. The dark liquid splashed violently, completely soaking Richard's $5,000 Berluti shoes and staining the cuffs of his pristine trousers. A dead silence fell over the boardroom, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. "My shoes," Richard whispered, his voice trembling with a rage so profound his face turned a mottled crimson. He slowly lowered his phone. He didn't look at Gregory. Instead, his furious gaze locked onto the nearest available target, the woman holding a microfiber cloth. "Chloe." "You," Richard hissed, stepping toward her. "You stupid, clumsy, incompetent wretch." Chloe slowly stood up, keeping her expression completely blank. "Sir, I didn't." "Shut your mouth!" Richard roared, the sudden volume making the board members flinch. "Do you know how much these shoes cost? Do you know who I am? I am Richard Harrington. You are nothing. You are a smudge of dirt on the floor of my building." "Mr. Harrington." It was Gregory who dropped the coffee, one of the braver board members murmured hesitantly. "I don't care," Richard spat, his ego demanding a sacrifice. He pointed a trembling, manicured finger at Chloe. She was in the way. If this walking piece of trash hadn't been lingering around like a stray dog, I wouldn't have bumped into him. This is what happens when you hire off the street. They have no grace, No intelligence, no situational awareness. He stepped closer to Chloe, towering over her, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and mint. Look at you, pathetic. You think you can just wander around my boardroom while I am preparing for the most important meeting of my life? You think your apologies mean anything to me? Chloe's jaw tightened imperceptibly. The muscles in her back coiled. 3 years ago, she had watched men far more dangerous than Richard Harrington beg for their lives. It took every ounce of her willpower to keep her hands relaxed at her sides instead of driving her palm upward into his nose. I apologize for the disruption, Mr. Harrington, Chloe said, her voice smooth, steady, and entirely devoid of the fear he was trying to extract from her. I will clean it up immediately. Her calmness only infuriated him further. He wanted her to cry. He wanted her to cower. Clean it? Richard laughed maliciously. Oh, you're going to clean it, but you aren't going to use a mop. Get on your knees. The room gasped. Gregory took a step forward. Sir, please, the Hayes delegation will be here any second. I said get on your knees, Richard bellowed, his eyes bulging. You are going to scrub this floor with your bare hands and that pathetic little rag. You're going to scrub my shoes until I can see my reflection in them. And if you miss a single spot, I will personally call the owner of your agency and ensure you are blacklisted from every minimum wage toilet scrubbing job in the state of Illinois. Now down. Chloe stared at him. A heavy, dangerous silence stretched between them. She calculated the variables. If she fought back, she would be arrested. Her fingerprints would be run through the system. Her alias would collapse. The cartel remnants would find her. Slowly, deliberately, Chloe lowered herself to the floor. She knelt on the damp, coffee-stained carpet, bowing her head, raising the cloth to the leather of his shoe. Richard sneered in triumph, looking around at his silent, complicit executives. That's exactly where you belong, he muttered, adjusting his tie. Right at my feet. The humiliation was a bitter pill, but Chloe swallowed it with the cold pragmatism of a survivor. As her hands worked over the stained leather of Richard's shoes, she detached her mind from the present. She focused on the rhythmic motion of the cloth, her breathing slow and controlled. She had stitched up gunshot wounds in dimly lit basements, while bullets tore through the walls above her. A bloated billionaire throwing a temper tantrum was nothing but a minor inconvenience. Harder, Richard snapped, tapping his foot impatiently against her knee. You missed a spot near the heel. Good God, you people are utterly useless. Why do I even pay for this service? I should have security throw you out on the street. Sir, Gregory interrupted, his voice squeaking with genuine terror. He was staring at the tablet in his hands. The private elevator. They're here. The atmosphere in the boardroom shifted instantly. The petty cruelty radiating from Richard vanished, replaced by sheer, desperate panic. He kicked his foot back, nearly striking Chloe in the chin, and scrambled backward. Move! Get out of sight! Hide behind the credenza. You wretched woman. Do not let him see you. But before Chloe could rise and disappear into the shadows, the heavy, frosted glass doors of the private elevator chimed. The doors slid open with a soft, mechanical hiss. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. 6 men stepped out first, broad-shouldered, imposing figures wearing impeccably tailored black suits. They moved with absolute, terrifying precision, fanning out across the boardroom and securing the perimeter in seconds. They weren't corporate security. They were apex predators. Then he walked in. Leon Hayes was a masterpiece of lethal elegance. Standing 6'3", he possessed a striking, angular jawline, high cheekbones, and piercing, obsidian eyes that looked right through the people in front of him. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit that draped perfectly over his athletic frame, the dark fabric amplifying the dangerous aura that surrounded him. This was the man who had taken the fractured remnants of his mother's Korean syndicate and forged it into an unstoppable empire of iron and blood. He was known in the underworld as a man without a heart, a ghost who had stopped smiling exactly 3 years ago. Richard Harrington practically sprinted forward, his previous arrogance entirely evaporated. He bowed deeply, a gesture of subservience that looked comical on the billionaire. Mr. Hayes, welcome to Harrington Holdings. It is an absolute honor to have you here, Richard gushed, his voice trembling. I apologize for the slight disarray. We had a minor incident with the hired help. Please, allow me to show you to the executive table. Leon didn't even look at Richard. His cold gaze swept over the room, instantly cataloging every threat, every exit, every face. And then his eyes stopped. Chloe was still kneeling on the floor near the edge of the table, her head bowed, her gray uniform stark against the luxurious carpet. She had frozen the moment she heard the elevator chime. She knew that footfall. She knew the exact cadence of his steps. Her heart, which had been so steady against Richard's abuse, suddenly began to hammer frantically against her ribs. No, she thought. Not yet. I'm not ready. Leon stopped breathing. The men surrounding him tensed, sensing the sudden, violent shift in their boss's demeanor. Leon's right hand twitched. Mr. Hayes? Richard asked, oblivious to the sudden tension. He followed Leon's gaze and felt a fresh spike of rage. I am so sorry. I told this useless maid to get out of sight. Security! Get her out of here immediately. Leon slowly turned his head to look at Richard. The expression on the mafia boss's face was so terrifyingly blank, so devoid of human empathy, that Richard actually stumbled backward. Leon stepped past the trembling CEO. He walked slowly across the boardroom, his expensive leather shoes stepping directly into the puddle of spilled coffee without a second thought. Hey, you! The boss is walking! Get out of the way! Gregory hissed at Chloe, terrified of the silent men in black suits. Chloe finally lifted her head. Her dark eyes met Leon's obsidian ones. Across the distance of the boardroom, 3 years of grief, bloodshed, mourning, and agony passed between them in a fraction of a second. Leon's stoic, terrifying mask cracked. His chest heaved. Richard, misinterpreting the silence as offense, rushed forward. Mr. Hayes, I will have her fired. I will ruin her. Please, don't let this trash ruin our deal. Leon moved faster than anyone could comprehend. He didn't yell. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply backhanded Richard Harrington across the face with such devastating force that the billionaire was lifted off his feet, crashing violently into the glass conference table. The heavy glass cracked. Richard crumpled to the floor, blood immediately pouring from his broken nose and shattered lip. The board members screamed, scrambling away. Leon's guards drew their weapons in unison, the sound of ratcheting slides echoing like thunder. But Leon raised a single trembling hand. They froze, lowering their guns instantly. Leon ignored the groaning, bleeding CEO. He took the final 2 steps toward the woman in the faded gray uniform. And then, the ruthless head of the most feared syndicate in the country did the unthinkable. He dropped to his knees. The expensive fabric of his trousers soaked up the spilled coffee. He didn't care. He reached out with hands that had dismantled empires, and gently, reverently, cupped Chloe's face. His thumbs traced the line of her cheekbones, as if making sure she wasn't a hallucination. Chloe, leaps, Leon whispered, his voice cracking, thick with a desperate, heavy emotion that sent shivers down the spines of his own guards. Chloe let out a shuddering breath, a single tear escaping her eye and rolling down her cheek. You finished the war, Leon? She asked softly. I burned it all to the ground, Leon choked out, pressing his forehead against hers right there on the stained floor of the boardroom. Every single person who ever threatened you is dead. I tore the world apart looking for you, my God, my queen. Why are you on this floor? He pulled back, his eyes catching the dirty rag in her hand, the stain on the carpet, and then drifting toward the whimpering billionaire, bleeding out on the marble. When Leon Hayes turned his head to look back at Richard Harrington, the grief in his eyes was gone. What replaced it was a promise of absolute, unmitigated hell. The boardroom of Harrington Holdings felt like a pressurized cabin moments before a catastrophic breach. Richard Harrington lay on the imported marble floor, gasping for air, clutching his shattered face. Blood pooled beneath him, stark and violently red against the pristine white stone. The executives who hadn't already fled were pressed flat against the far glass walls, their expensive suits soaked in cold sweat, praying the armed men in the room wouldn't notice them. Leon Hayes rose slowly from his knees. The tenderness that had just softened his features vanished, replaced by a terrifying, glacial calm. He looked down at the coffee stains on his trousers, then shifted his obsidian gaze to the trembling billionaire. You made her kneel, Leon said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a deadly, quiet rasp that carried perfectly across the dead silence of the room. I didn't know! Richard choked out, spitting blood onto the floor as he scrambled backward like a crab, his Berluti shoes slipping on his own blood. Mr. Hayes, please, I swear to God I didn't know who she was. She was wearing a uniform. She was just a cleaner. Her name, Leon said, taking a slow, measured step forward, is Dr. Chloe Washington, former chief surgical resident at Northwestern Memorial. She was the youngest attending trauma surgeon to ever operate at Severance Hospital in Seoul. She is a woman who has saved more lives with her bare hands than you have ruined with your fountain pens. And she is the woman who is going to wear my ring. A collective gasp echoed from the remaining board members. Gregory, the pale assistant, dropped his tablet, his jaw unhinged in absolute shock. Leon's right-hand man, a towering enforcer named Caleb, stepped forward and handed his boss a silk handkerchief. Leon systematically wiped the coffee from his hands, never breaking eye contact with Richard. Mr. Hayes, we have a deal, Richard pleaded, tears streaming down his bruised face, mixing with the blood. His legendary arrogance had completely evaporated, leaving only a pathetic, desperate man. The bankruptcy. The syndicate promised an injection of $300 million. You signed the letter of intent. You need Harrington Holdings for your legitimate front in Chicago. Leon let out a dry, hollow chuckle. He tossed the stained silk handkerchief directly onto Richard's chest. I don't need your failing company, Richard. I never did, Leon murmured. Do you think it was a coincidence? I agreed to meet you today. My network tracked a biometric anomaly near the Federal Reserve Bank on LaSalle Street 3 days ago. A facial recognition hit on a ghost. I bought your company's debt purely as an excuse to breach this building and tear it apart floor by floor until I found her. Richard's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror as the reality of his situation set in. Caleb. Leon snapped his fingers. The enforcer pulled a sleek satellite phone from his jacket and dialed a single number. He handed it to Leon. Execute the hostile takeover, Leon commanded into the receiver, his eyes locked on Richard. Dump the Harrington stock we acquired last week. Short it to zero. Call in the mezzanine loans from the shell corporations. And trigger the morality clause in the board's fiduciary contracts. Liquidate him. No, no, please, Richard screamed, trying to get up. But two of the syndicate guards stepped forward, their sheer presence forcing him back down. That's my father's legacy. You'll wipe out my entire net worth. I'll have nothing. You'll have exactly what you deserve, Leon replied coldly. You thought she was a smudge of dirt on your floor? By the time the New York Stock Exchange closes in 20 minutes, Richard, you won't even be able to afford the mop she was using. Leon turned his back on the ruined billionaire, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. He walked back to Chloe. She was standing now, having silently observed the destruction of the man who had tormented her for months. She still wore the shapeless gray uniform, her hair messy from the confrontation. But the way she carried herself had fundamentally shifted. She was no longer hiding. Leon, Chloe said softly. Her voice was steady, grounded. She looked at Richard, who was now openly sobbing on the floor, clutching his broken nose. That's enough. Leon paused, his brow furrowing. He humiliated you, Chloe. I should throw him through that window. He's a pathetic bully who just lost everything, Chloe replied, her tone clinical and detached. Killing him or physically torturing him won't change what happened, and it won't erase the last 3 years. I'm a doctor, Leon. I don't want more blood on my hands, and I certainly don't want it on yours because of me. She stepped past Leon, walking directly toward Richard. The guards tensed, but Leon raised a hand, silently ordering them to stand down. Chloe knelt beside the weeping billionaire. Richard flinched violently, raising his hands to protect his face. But Chloe simply reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a clean, sealed package of sterile gauze she always kept on her, a remnant of her past life, and tossed it onto his lap. Apply pressure to the bridge of your nose and lean forward, not backward, or you'll choke on your own blood, Chloe instructed with crisp, professional authority. You have a bilateral fracture. You'll need an otolaryngologist to set it, or you'll have a deviated septum for the rest of your life. She stood up, looking down at him with a mixture of pity and absolute dominance. And, Mr. Harrington, you missed a spot on your shoes. With that, Chloe turned her back on the ruined CEO. She unbuttoned the cheap gray apron of Pristine Cleaning Services, let it slip from her shoulders, and let it drop onto the coffee-stained carpet. She walked toward Leon. He held out his hand. She took it, their fingers interlacing, for the first time in over 1,000 days. The warmth of his grip sent a shockwave of electricity through her system, a sudden, fierce reminder that she was finally safe. Let's go home, Leon whispered. The descent from the 75th floor was a study in absolute silence. Chloe stood shoulder to shoulder with Leon in the private glass elevator as it plummeted toward the Chicago streets. The city sprawled out beneath them, a labyrinth of concrete and steel, but for the first time in 3 years, it didn't look like a hiding place. It looked like a kingdom. Leon hadn't let go of her hand. His thumb traced circles over her knuckles, feeling the calluses she had developed from years of manual labor. Every rough patch on her skin was a physical indictment of his failure to protect her sooner, and Chloe could see the quiet fury still simmering behind his dark eyes. "You're thinking too loudly," Chloe murmured, breaking the silence. Leon looked down at her, his jaw tight. "I'm thinking about the fact that you were scrubbing floors while I was sitting in penthouses. I'm thinking about how many men like Harrington spoke to you that way while you were trying to survive. It kept me alive," she reminded him gently. A high-profile trauma surgeon suddenly appearing in America would have drawn the cartel's attention in seconds. A cleaning lady with a fake social security number was invisible. It was the only way to ensure they couldn't use me as leverage to kill you. "The cartel is dead, Chloe," Leon stated, his voice carrying the finality of a graveyard. "The leaders in Seoul? Buried. The lieutenants who put the bounty on you? Dust. I spent the last 3 years ripping the underworld apart at the seams. There is no one left to hide from. The war is over." The elevator chimed, opening into the secure underground parking garage. A fleet of black armored SUVs was waiting, engines purring softly. Caleb opened the door of the lead vehicle for them. As they slid into the plush leather interior, Chloe finally allowed the adrenaline to fade. The exhaustion of 3 years of constant vigilance crashed into her all at once. She leaned her head against Leon's shoulder. He immediately wrapped a heavy protective arm around her, pulling her close, resting his chin on the top of her head. "Where are we going?" she asked, her eyes closing. "The St. Regis," Leon replied. "I bought the top 3 floors last year. It's a fortress. Tomorrow my tailors will arrive to throw out that uniform. My doctors will give you a full workup. And then I'm buying you a hospital." Chloe laughed softly, a genuine sound that made Leon's chest tighten with relief. "A hospital? Leon, you can't just buy a hospital like it's a handbag." "Watch me," he countered, a ghost of his old, arrogant smirk finally returning. "I hear Northwestern Memorial is looking for a new wing to be funded. You belong in an operating room, Chloe, not hiding in the shadows. You're going to take your life back, and I'm going to make sure no one ever stands in your way again." The drive through the neon-lit streets of Chicago was a blur. When they finally arrived at the penthouse, Chloe was breathless. The space was a masterpiece of modern architecture, featuring sweeping, uninterrupted views of the lake. But it wasn't the luxury that caught her attention. Sitting on the massive marble kitchen island was a single framed photograph. It was a picture of Chloe and Leon in Seoul, taken days before the hit was ordered. In the photo, she was wearing her white surgical coat, laughing as Leon pressed a kiss to her cheek. It was the only piece of decor in the otherwise sterile, minimalist penthouse. He had kept it looking exactly like that, a shrine to a ghost, waiting for her to return. "I looked at it every morning," Leon said softly, stepping up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "It was the only thing that kept me from burning the entire world down." Chloe turned in his arms, looking up into the eyes of the most dangerous man in the city, the man who had bent empires to his will, but had dropped to his knees the second he found her. She reached up, framing his face with her hands, tracing the faint scar on his jawline that she had stitched herself years ago. "You don't have to burn the world anymore, Leon," she whispered, pulling him down to meet her lips. "I'm right here." As they kissed, the city of Chicago glittered beneath them, oblivious to the shift in power. Richard Harrington was currently being escorted out of his own building by federal agents, his assets frozen, his legacy reduced to ashes in a matter of minutes. The men who had hunted them were dead. The shadows were finally gone. Chloe Jenkins, the invisible maid, was dead. Dr. Chloe Washington had returned. And with the king of the syndicate standing by her side, the world was finally theirs for the taking. Are you obsessed with this kind of ultimate revenge and billionaire mafia drama? The satisfaction of watching a ruthless, arrogant bully get exactly what he deserves never gets old. If you loved seeing Leon dismantle an empire to protect his queen, drop a like, share this story with your friends who need some spicy drama in their lives, and hit that subscribe button for more intense, real life inspired romance thrillers. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in Chloe's shoes.
Hi, my name is Trent, the owner and manager of Court Secrets. After watching the video, arrogant CEO humiliates a cleaning lady until the Korean Mafia boss walks in and kneels before her. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What hit me most was how quickly people judge others based on appearance or status. Sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the deepest respect and power. This story wasn't just about revenge. It was about dignity, humility, and the danger of underestimating people. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly like this? And if you were in that room, how would you react when the truth came out? Thanks for spending time with Court Secrets. If this story stayed with you, feel free to leave a comment, like, and subscribe for more powerful stories. See you again in my next story.